everybody, Morgan with Event Answer here, and today I'm plasti dipping all of my favorite tools. So whenever I'm setting up for a special event, a lot of times there's other professionals that have their own toolkits, and inevitably by the end of the night there's a lonesome pair of scissors that nobody knows whose it belongs to. So I'm going to help fix that by plasti dipping all of my favorite tools in my favorite color so I can know which ones are mine. So follow along and I'll show you exactly how I plasti dip my tools. I've gathered up 10 of my most often used tools out of my event toolkit today. In addition to those, I've got some rubbing alcohol and paper towels, my plasti dip in tropical turquoise, and 2 different sizes of painter's tape or masking tape that I'll use to protect the parts of the tool that I don't want to get plasti dip on. So the first thing I'm going to do is start cleaning all of my tools. So I've donned some rubber gloves before cleaning everything with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. These are all tools that I've been using for a long time, so there's probably some dirt and some grime, some oils on them, and I just want to make sure I remove all of that before I start applying the plasti dip to make sure I get the best adhesion possible. The next step is the most important and also the most time-consuming, and that's masking off all the parts of the tools that I don't want the plasti dip to be on. The time and energy you put into this step is what will be most rewarded with the final project. I alternated between using the wide and the thin masking tape to get right up to the edge as close as possible without accidentally wrapping that masking tape up onto the rubber portion, which I would want plasti dip to be on. I also found it helpful to use an X-Acto knife to really trim up and get clean lines along all the edges of the tools. The tape measure, utility knife, and my craft knife, I did have to partially disassemble those so I could get all of the pieces coated evenly with plasti dip. So you saw here that I removed the belt clip off of the tape measure, and then I'm just going to go in and cover the entire button on the measuring tape because I don't want to mess with the mechanism of that locking button. So there will be a little yellow showing around that button, but I've given it a nice clean edge, which I think will help make up for that fact. So I'm going to go ahead and finish wrapping up all of the tools until I've got all of my metal sections and sections I don't want to be plasti dipped all covered in masking tape, and now we're ready to start plasti dipping. I prepared my painting area by laying down some paper on my table and gathering a couple of these plastic clips which will help me support the tools while they dry, and I also have this piece of scrap wood that I've clamped to the edge of the table which will act as a clothesline for all of my pliers so I can hang them to dry. I'm also working in a well-ventilated area. This spray is pretty toxic, so I have the door open with a fan running, so make sure you're somewhere where there's a lot of good airflow or you're wearing a respirator while you spray this product. Holding the can 6 to 8 inches from the tool, I'm going to apply the product on all sides of the tool before I set it aside to dry. I don't want to do half of it and then flip it over and do the other half, because if you touch the plasti dip while it's wet, you will mar it. So try and get a nice even coat until it's all glossy and well covered before setting it aside to dry. Now I'm going to use these clips as a little stand so that I don't accidentally bump the scissors or the pliers on the table while they dry. So here's coat number 2, and I'm going to go back and reapply again, and I'm watching for anywhere where a previous color was still showing through. That tells me that maybe there was a thin spot there. So you can see a little bit of orange on the X-Acto knife sitting on the table, and so I'm going to make sure I hit those edges really well before I set these aside to dry again for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to come back for round 3 and the final coat on all my tools. Plasti dip usually goes on in 3 or 4 coats, but I think that really depends on the tool and how thick you're applying it. 3 was what ended up working for all of my tools really well. So I'm going to set these aside for several hours to let them completely dry before I start pulling off all the masking. Careful removal of the masking tape is just as important as your meticulous application of the tape. Because that plasti dip is sprayed on top of the tape, if you just start ripping it off, it'll stretch the plasti dip that's already there and will give you some really jagged edges. So take your time, slowly pull off the tape, and use a craft knife to go along all the edges first so you get a nice clean cut and sharp lines to all of your tape marks. So once I've got all of the tape removed, I will go ahead and reapply any hardware that I removed and reassemble all the tools that I had disassembled. Most of the tools, the tape came off super easily. So my screwdriver, hammer, all the pliers, it came off really quick because it had nice clean lines. The X-Acto knife that I'm holding there was probably the most complex because it had that center washer on it. But in the end, everything came off nice and smooth, and I'm so pleased with how these tools came out. wait to get to use these tools on my next project. I'm so stoked with how this turned out, and to finally have tools in my favorite color makes me so happy. So I can't wait to get to use these. I'm pleased with how the results have turned out. You know, most of them have a really nice smooth finish and the edges are pretty clean. There's a couple where maybe the edges weren't completely clean, where I could have maybe done a better masking job, or like the little bit of yellow on the tape measure. But honestly, I'm not bothered by that. I really didn't want to completely deconstruct this to mask that off completely, so I can live with a little bit of yellow on there. But overall, I'm so pleased with how this project turned out and can't wait to get to use these soon. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a like. It lets me know that you've enjoyed today's content, and I would also love to have you subscribe and join our creative community. I do all kinds of projects focused around event planning, party planning, decorations, and balloon tutorials. So if that's something that interests you, please consider subscribing, or you can check out some of the videos over here where I've got all kinds of other projects. So until the next time, remember to stay creative. Bye!